Hi, I'm Peter J. Ray. Welcome to Adventures in History. Today's topic is the 1948 Cleveland Buckeyes Negro American League baseball season. Again, the Buckeyes were playing in the Negro American League, the junior circuit of Negro League baseball. Home games were primarily played at League Park at East 66th and Lexington on the east side of Cleveland, as well as Cleveland Municipal Stadium downtown. The Monarchs had a strong year in 1948, finished in third place with a record of 38-32, winning percentage of .543, 12 games out of first. The first place team was the Kansas City Monarchs, who were 51-28, winning percentage of .708, and they won the first half championship. Second place team was the Birmingham Black Barons, who were 39-17. They won the second place championship. So the Monarchs and Black Barons played each other in the Negro American League Championship Series. And Birmingham had a young fellow named Willie Mays playing for them. Third place, the Cleveland Buckeyes, 38-32. Fourth place, the Indianapolis Clowns, 29-48. Fifth place, the Chicago American Giants, 26-44. Where have you gone, Rube Foster? And in sixth and last place, the Memphis Red Sox, who were 24-45, winning percentage of .348, 25 games out of first. Buck O'Neil was the player-manager for the Kansas City Monarchs in 1948, and he said this, quote, we were seeing the beginning of the end of the Negro Leagues. Black baseball wasn't dead yet in 1948, but it was dying. Regarding being a manager, Buck O'Neil said, quote, some guys need pats on the back, some guys need kicks in the butt, and some guys just plain need to be left alone, and some guys need all three. 1948, the black newspapers were ignoring the Negro Leagues, focusing on the MLB black players in the major leagues, specifically Jackie Robinson and Roy Campanella for the Brooklyn Dodgers, and Larry Doby and Satchel Paige for the Cleveland Indians. Integration was gaining speed, and this really would mean the end of Negro League baseball. 1948, Jackie Robinson had this to say about the Negro Leagues, quote, players have to make the jump between cities in uncomfortable buses, and then play in games half asleep and very tired. Umpiring is unsupervised and quite prejudiced in many cases. The umpires are quite often untrained and favor certain teams. When players are able to get a night's rest, the hotels are usually of the cheapest kind. The rooms are dingy and dirty, and the restrooms in such condition that the players are unable to use them. With the Monarchs, I found the rules as far as players were so lax that on many days some of the players would not get to bed at all. They were allowed to drink whenever they pleased. Now, F.M. Manley, the owner of the Newark Eagles, reacted, and there's a lot of people were upset about these things that Jack Robinson had said about the Negro Leagues. Quote, frankly, no greater outrage could have been perpetuated. No greater ingratitude was ever displayed. How could a child nurtured by its mother turn on her within a year after he leaves her modest home for glamour, success, and good fortune? Jackie Robinson is where he is today because of organized Negro baseball. So those comments by Jackie Robinson really, they played a role in the demise of the Negro Leagues. 1948 Negro League attendance plummeted as black fans were going to MLB games to see these black players. Kansas City Monarchs pitcher Hilton Smith said, quote, all the people started to go Brooklynites. Even if we were playing here in Kansas City, everybody would go over to St. Louis to see Jackie Robinson. So our league began to go down, down, down. By 1948, 2,000 fans was a good crowd for a Negro League game at Yankee Stadium, the Polo Grounds, Shibe Park, or Comiskey Park. Some of the crowds were as low as 700. The Newark Eagles lost $25,000 in 1948. So Abe and Effa Manley sold the team after the season. They also, before they did, they sold Monty Irvin to the New York Giants for $5,000. And then the Newark Eagles moved to Texas and became the Houston Eagles in 1949. After the season, the Washington Homestead Grays folded or pulled out of the Negro National League, and they won the Negro World Series in 1948. So that kind of shows how bad things were getting. The Grays had lost $45,000 the last 2 years, and then after this they competed in the minor Negro American Association. The New York Black Yankees also folded after this 1948 season, and the Negro National League died. So by the following year, it was only the Negro American League. The Baltimore Elite Giants, New York Cubans, and Philadelphia Stars joined the Negro American League for 1949. And then that league, the Negro American League, split into two divisions, East and West. And the Newark Eagles in 1948 attendance was 25% of what it had been in 1946. So there was a drastic collapse of attendance, which doomed the Negro Leagues. The Eagles were sold for only $15,000, and Abe and Effa Manley had bought the team for $100,000. January of 1948, Larry Doby integrated the American Basketball League when he signed to play for the Paterson, New Jersey Crescents. And again, the black press abandoned the Negro Leagues. Effa Manley said, quote, "If the sports writers will evidence the same enthusiasm toward our Negro Leagues, will evidence the same enthusiasm toward our Negro Baseball Leagues as they do about the Negro players in the white major leagues, the future of Negro baseball will not be in jeopardy." Well, they didn't do that. In July of 48, the Cleveland Indians purchased Satchel Paige from the Kansas City Monarchs, and this meant the Negro Leagues lost their biggest star. In Satchel Paige's first three starts for the tribe, for the Cleveland Indians, attendance was more than 200,000. Mark Rabowski wrote, quote, "Here was the greatest sporting legend since Babe Ruth, being seen by the masses for the first time at age 42, and the sympathy and respect he engendered stoked the notion that justice had surely been denied him and men like him." Satchel Paige went 6-1 with an ERA of 2.48, 45 strikeouts, 2 shutouts, and helped the tribe win the pennant and the World Series. Mark Rabowski continued, quote, "If Satchel Paige could go 6-1 as an old wheel horse, it must have occurred to many, what kind of holy terror must he have been as a colt? Arguably, the two biggest attractions in the game were now two African Americans of totally different stripes. Jackie Robinson with his growing but contained sense of righteous indignation, and Satchel Paige with his puckish sense of the absurd." So, yeah, in 1948, the two most popular players in MLB were African Americans. So you can see how tough this made it for support for the Negro League games. In 1948, there were 16 black players in the white minor leagues, mostly for the Brooklyn Dodgers and Cleveland Indians. I read a fine book, Jackie and Me, A Baseball Card Adventure, by Dan Gutman, 1999. It's a wonderful book. This boy travels back in time and gets to meet Jackie Robinson. Jackie Robinson's epitaph includes this, quote, "A life is not important except in the impact it has on other lives." I'm reading another fine book. The title is Willie's Boys, the 1948 Birmingham Black Barons, the last Negro League World Series in the making of an American legend, by John Klima, 2009. John Klima wrote, quote, "No state produced more Negro League ball players than Alabama. At the Negro American League 1948 opener, the Cleveland Buckeyes were playing in Birmingham against the Black Barons, and the Black Barons won that game 11-2. The starting pitcher for Cleveland was Sam Jones. John Klima wrote about 1948. He called this, quote, "the last great summer of Negro League baseball." The players were all hoping, they knew the door was open for MLB, and they were all hoping to sign with MLB teams. John Klima wrote, quote, "The games were suddenly about not just winning, but escaping a dying league." Willie Mays was still in high school, but he joined the Birmingham Black Barons in July. He'd finished his sophomore year of high school. John Klima wrote, quote, Willie Mays was baseball's Mozart, a child prodigy gifted well beyond ordinary youngsters whose talents exceeded those of most adults. Klima continued, quote, Nobody thought statistics meant anything, and the majority of games were forgotten as soon as they were finished. Yeah, this is so frustrating, the lack of statistics for Negro League teams and players. In July of 1948, the Cleveland Buckeyes sold star center fielder Sam Jethro to the Brooklyn Dodgers for $5,000. So Cleveland lost its best player. Ken Kersalovic and Brian Fritz, who wrote a book about the League Park, wrote this about the Tribe signing Satchel Paige in 1948, quote, The sad irony of Paige's signing with the Indians was that it helped seal the fate of Negro baseball in Cleveland and beyond. Yeah, this really hurt. The 48 Buckeyes were really hurt by the fact that the Cleveland Indians, won the World Series, and they had these two star players, Larry Doby, who made a major contribution, and Satchel Paige, the greatest Negro League player of all time. The Buckeyes' 48 home opener was at League Park. And who wanted to go to a Buckeyes game when you could go see Satchel Paige and Larry Doby play for the Indians? Cleveland Mayor Tom Burke was at the Buckeyes home opener wearing a cap of the Buckeyes and threw out the first pitch. There were 6,000 fans at that game. On June 6th, the Buckeyes played a doubleheader against the Memphis Red Sox, and the game was broadcast on television by WEWS, and the announcer was Van Patrick. On June 13th at League Park, the Buckeyes swept the Kansas City Monarchs 65-4-2, so that was wonderful. There was a July 4th doubleheader against the Indianapolis Clowns at League Park, and 6,500 fans came, the highest for the year. Because of this poor attendance, the team moved to Louisville, Kentucky in 1949, but then came back for one final year in 1950. The Buckeyes' attendance had peaked at about 10,000 or 15,000 fans per game in the Second World War. But by 1947, most games was down to 5,000. And during the 1947 Negro World Series, there were games where there were only 3,000 or 4,500 fans at League Park. So again, smaller crowds, less media coverage, and the Negro Leagues started to collapse. Again, the Tribe won the 1948 World Series with star players Larry Doby and Satchel Paige, and the Buckeyes were almost completely forgotten as a result. Now, the manager for the Buckeyes in 1948, Quincy Troop, was gone. Very sad, but the manager was Alonzo Boone, who played for the Cleveland Cubs in 1931, the Cleveland Bears from 1939 to 1940, the Cincinnati Cleveland Buckeyes in 1942, and the Cleveland Buckeyes in 1943, 1945 to 1948, and in 1950. Alonzo Boone. Tommy Harris was the catcher. Again, these statistics are very incomplete. According to the stats we have, Harris batted .147 with 5 hits. He scored 2 runs, had a home run, 3 RBIs, a walk in 10 games. And Harris was with the Cleveland Buckeyes from 1946 to 1948. This was the end of his time in Cleveland. His Negro League career continued until 1949. Tommy Harris. Archie Ware was at first base. Ware batted .294 with 15 hits. He scored 6 runs, had 2 doubles, a triple, 2 RBIs, a walk in 13 games. Ware played for the Cincinnati Cleveland Buckeyes in 1942 and the Cleveland Buckeyes from 1943 to 1948. This was the end of his time in Cleveland. His pro baseball career continued until 1952. Archie Ware. Bill Reynolds was at second base. Reynolds batted .216 with 8 hits. He scored 3 runs, had a double, 5 RBIs, a stolen base in 10 games. During his career, Reynolds played second base, shortstop, and third base. He played for the Cleveland Buckeyes and Louisville Buckeyes from 1948 to 1950. He was a light hitter and batted 8th in the order in 1948 and was born in 1929. Bill Reynolds. Leon Kelman was at third base. Kelman batted .281 with 9 hits. He scored 3 runs, had a double, a triple, 7 RBIs, 3 walks in 9 games. Kelman was with the Cleveland Buckeyes from 1946 to 1948. This was the end of his time in Cleveland. His pro baseball career continued for another 10 years until 1958. Leon Kelman. Chico Renfro played shortstop. Renfroe batted .385 with 15 hits. He scored 7 runs, had a double, a triple, 8 RBIs, a stolen base, 5 walks in 13 games. His given name was Othello Nelson. They called him Chico or Chappie. He played for the Kansas City Monarchs, Cleveland Buckeyes, the Indianapolis Clowns, in Mexico for the Torreon Algodoneros, in the minor leagues for Minot in North Dakota, and in Venezuela and the Dominican Republic from 1945 to 1954. He was a scrappy, versatile player, a 1946 All-Star. In the 1946 Negro World Series, he hit .414 for the Kansas City Monarchs. He played with the Satchel Paige All-Stars against the Bob Feller All-Stars in those exhibition games. Renfroe was a good base stealer, a good bunter, and good at the hit and run. He went to Clark College. With the Kansas City Monarchs, Jackie Robinson was the shortstop, and then went to Brooklyn, or the Brooklyn organization. Then Renfroe became the starting shortstop. After he retired, Renfroe worked for the Atlanta for the U.S. Post Office. He was also a sportscaster and sports director for the Atlanta radio station WIGO, and he was the sports editor for the Atlanta Daily Word newspaper, as well as a scout for the Montreal Expos. He was the first official scorer for the Atlanta Braves. Wow, what a tremendous career. Renfroe was born in 1923 in Newark, New Jersey, and died in 1991 in Atlanta, Georgia at age 68. During his Negro League career, he batted .278 with 90 hits. He scored 51 runs, 9 doubles, 5 triples, a home run, 33 RBIs, 7 stolen bases, 45 walks in 102 games. Chico Renfroe. Al Smith was in left field. Smith batted .333 with 12 hits. He scored 6 runs, had 2 doubles, a triple, a home run, 8 RBIs, 4 walks in 10 games. Smith was with the Cleveland Buckeyes from 1946 to 1948. This was the end of his time with the Buckeyes. His MLB career continued. He had an MLB career which lasted until 1964, and he played for the Cleveland Indians from 1953 to 1957 and in 1964. Al Smith. Sam the Jet Jethro was in center field. Jethro batted .263 with 5 hits. He scored 5 runs, had 2 doubles, a home run, 5 RBIs, a stolen base, 2 walks in 5 games. Jethro was with the Cleveland Buckeyes from 1942 to 1948, and this was the end of his time in Cleveland. His MLB career continued until 1954, and he continued in the minor leagues until 1958. Jethro was sold to the Brooklyn Dodgers in July of '48 for $5,000. The following year, in 1949, Brooklyn sold Jethro to the Boston Braves for $150,000. Nice profit for the Dodgers. And in 1950, Jethro was the National League Rookie of the Year at age 32. Sam Jethro. Willie Grace was in right field. Grace batted .288 with 15 hits. He scored 6 runs, had a double, a triple, 7 RBIs, a walk in 13 games. Grace was with the Cincinnati Cleveland Buckeyes in 1942 and the Cleveland Buckeyes from 1943 to 1948 and in 1950. And his minor league career continued until 1951. Willie Grace. Joe Green was a spare catcher. Green batted .143 with 3 hits. He scored 4 runs, had 2 home runs, 5 RBIs, 6 walks in 9 games. They called Green P and Pig. He was a catcher, first baseman, and outfielder. He played for the Atlanta Black Crackers, Homestead Grays, Kansas City Monarchs, and the Cleveland Buckeyes in the minor leagues for Elmwood in the Mondock League. He was a catcher who handled the great Kansas City Monarchs staffs of the 1940s. He was a good, durable receiver with a quick release and a powerful throwing arm. He was a good fastball hitter with good power. He led the Negro American League in home runs in 1940 with 33, and in 1942 with 38. He lacked speed on the bases. He won a 1942 World Series title with Kansas City and hit .444 in the World Series. He was an All-Star in 1942. He was the best catcher in the Negro Leagues during his era. In the Second World War, he had military service in the 92nd Division of the U.S. Army, saw action in Algeria, North Africa, and in Italy. He spent 8 months on the front lines in the Second World War. He was working with a 57mm anti-tank company and was decorated for his combat service. He entered his division entered Milano, Italy, and his company took down the dead body of Benito Mussolini and his mistress, who were hanging upside down. Again, they called him Pig because he was a big eater, and they called him Pea because he threw peas to second base. In other words, quick throws. From 1946 to 48, he hit 300, 324, and 257. Green was born in 1911 in Stone Mountain, Georgia, and died in 1989 in Stone Mountain at age 77. For his career, he batted .249 with 163 hits, 115 runs, 31 doubles, 18 triples, 11 home runs, 102 RBIs, 7 stolen bases, 98 walks in 209 games. He was an All-Star in 1940 and 1942 and won a Negro League World Series title in 1942 with the Kansas City Monarchs. Joe Green. Clyde Nelson was at second base. Nelson batted .217 with 5 hits. He scored 7 runs, had 2 doubles, and 3 RBIs, 2 walks in 8 games. And Nelson was with the Cleveland Buckeyes from 1947 to 1948. This was the end of his time in Cleveland. His Negro League baseball career continued until 1949. Clyde Nelson. George Minor played some outfield. Minor batted .316 with 6 hits. He scored 4 runs, had a double, a triple, and RBI, stolen base in 6 games. Minor was with the Cleveland Buckeyes from 1944 to 1948. This was the end of his time in Cleveland. His Negro League baseball career continued until 1949. George Minor. Henry Presswood played some shortstop. Presswood batted .308 with 4 hits. He scored a run, had 2 walks in 5 games. During his career, he was a shortstop and third baseman. He played for the Cleveland Buckeyes and Kansas City Monarchs between 1948 and 1952. Presswood was born in 1921 in Electric Mills, Mississippi, and died in 2014 in Chicago, Illinois at age 93. Henry Presswood. Nat McClintock batted 6 times, did not have a hit. He scored 2 runs, had a walk in 3 games. McClintock was with the Cleveland Buckeyes from 1946 to 1948, and this was the end of his Negro League baseball career. Nat McClintock. Clyde Williams played some left field. He batted 7 times, did not have a hit in 1 game. Williams played for the Cleveland Buckeyes from 1947 to 1948 and in 1950. Clyde Williams. Burnell Longest played some second base. Longest batted .250 with 1 hit in 4 at-bats. He scored a run, had a double, and a walk in 1 game. They called him Chick. He played second base, third base, and outfield. Longest played for the Chicago American Giants, the Cleveland Buckeyes, the Chicago Brown Bombers, the Miners for Carmon in the Mondock League, and for Burlington in the Provincial League from 1942 to 1955. He was born in 1917 in Chicago, Illinois, and died in 1984 in Southfield, Michigan at age 67. For his career, he batted .316 with 42 hits. Scored 22 runs, 5 doubles, 2 triples, 15 RBIs, 2 stolen bases, 11 walks in 32 games. Burnell Longest. Cannonball Berry played some right field. He batted 3 times, did not have a hit in 1 game. Berry played for the St. Louis Stars, Atlanta Black Crackers, Kansas City Monarchs, and Cleveland Buckeyes. From 1937 to 1948, they called him Showboat Mike and Red. He was born in 1913. For his career as a pitcher, he was 2-4 with an ERA of 7.12, 11 games, 4 starts, a complete game, a save, 30 and a third innings pitched, and 20 strikeouts. For his career, as a hitter, he batted .154 with 2 hits and 13 at-bats. Cannonball Berry. Eddie Johnson played some right field. He batted .667 with 2 hits and 3 at-bats in 1 game. And his Negro League baseball career was just with the Cleveland Buckeyes in 1948. Eddie Johnson. Now, the pitching staff, Vibert Clark was the ace pitcher. Clark was 3-2 with an ERA of 3.82. 5 games, all starts, 4 complete games, 37 and 2/3 innings pitched, and 11 strikeouts. Clark batted .294 with 5 hits. He scored 3 runs, had a double, and a stolen base. Clark was with the Cleveland Buckeyes from 1946 to 1948. His pro baseball career in MLB and the minors continued until 1957. Vibert Clark. Eugene Smith was 0-2 with an ERA of 7.07. 2 games, both starts, a complete game, 14 innings pitched, and 7 strikeouts. He batted .200 with 1 hit and 5 at-bats, scored a run, and had a walk. Smith was with the Cleveland Buckeyes from from 1947 to 1948, and in 1950, Eugene Smith. Chet Brewer was 0-2 with an ERA of 5.84. 2 games, both starts, 12 and a third innings, pitched and 8 strikeouts. Brewer batted .200 with 1 hit and 5 at-bats. He scored a run, had a walk in 3 games. Brewer was with the Cincinnati Cleveland Buckeyes in 1942, and the Cleveland Buckeyes from 1946 to 1948. This was the end of his time in Cleveland. His pro baseball career continued. He played in the minor leagues until 1952. Chet Brewer. Eugene Bremer was 0-1 with an ERA of 2.001 game, which was a start, 9 innings pitched, and 5 strikeouts. Bremer batted .400 with 2 hits and 5 at-bats, had a double in 3 games. He played for the Cincinnati Cleveland Buckeyes in 1942 and the Cleveland Buckeyes from 1943 to 1948. This was the end of his time in Cleveland. His pro baseball career continued in the minor leagues until 1949. Eugene Bremer. Sam Jones was 0-1 with an ERA of 8.22. 2 games, 1 start, 7 2/3 innings pitched, and 5 strikeouts. He batted 4 times and did not have a hit. He played for the Cleveland Buckeyes from 1947 to 1948. This was the end of his time in Cleveland. As a Buckeye, he returned as an MLB player and played for the Cleveland Indians from 1951 to 1952, and his MLB career continued until 1964. Sam Jones. Frank Carswell was 0-1 with an ERA of 3.68. 2 games, both starts, 7 1/3 innings pitched, and 2 strikeouts. He batted twice and did not have a hit. Carswell was with the Cleveland Buckeyes from 1944 to 1948. This was the end of his time in Cleveland. His Negro League baseball career continued until 1953. Frank Carswell. John Brown had no decisions and an ERA of 0.79. 3 games, 11 1/3 innings pitched, and 6 strikeouts. He batted once, did not have a hit, and walked 3 times. Brown played for the Cleveland Buckeyes from 1944 to 1945 and in 1948. This was the end of his time in Cleveland. His Negro League baseball career continued until 1949. John Brown. Ernest Long was 1-0 with an ERA of 1.80. 1 game, 5 innings pitched, and 1 strikeout. He batted once and did not have a hit. They called him the Kid. He was a pitcher, outfielder, and first baseman during his career. He played for the Chattanooga Choo-Choos, the Cleveland Buckeyes, and Louisville Buckeyes from 1945 to 1950. He was a 1949 All-Star. Long settled in Rome, Georgia. He was born in 1927 in Chattanooga, Tennessee, and died in 2000 in Rome, Georgia at age 72. Ernest Long. And finally, Al Pinkston was a pinch hitter. He batted once, did not have a hit, walked once in 2 games. During his career, he played first base, outfield, and catcher. Pinkston played for the St. Louis Stars, Cleveland Buckeyes, in Canada for Ottawa, in the minor leagues for Amarillo, New Mexico, in Mexico for Veracruz from 1936 to 1965. Wow. He was a hard-hitting first baseman outfielder. In 1952 in the Provincial League in Canada, he had 30 home runs and 121 RBIs and won the Triple Crown. In Amarillo, he led the league in RBIs for 2 years. In Mexico, his first 4 years, he won 4 batting titles, batting .369, .397, .374, and .381. For the Mexico City Reds. He also, from Veracruz, he batted .368, .364, and .345. Playing in Mexico, he had a lifetime average of .352, and he was the first American inducted into the Mexican Baseball Hall of Fame. Pinkston was born in 1917 in New Bern, Alabama, and died in 1981 in Fort Wayne, Indiana at age 63. Yet, during his 15 years of professional baseball, Pinkston batted .312 with 1,312 hits. He scored 272 runs, 260 doubles, 42 triples, 164 home runs, 314 RBIs, 8 stolen bases, 112 walks in 1,630 games. What a tremendous career for Al Pinkston. Now, after the regular season, the 1948 Negro World Series was played. This was the final, the last Negro World Series. The Washington Homestead Grays, the Negro National League champions, defeated the Birmingham Black Barons, the Negro American League champions, 4-1. Game 1 was at Blues Stadium in Kansas City, even though Kansas City wasn't in the World Series. Games 2, 3, and 5 were in Birmingham, Alabama at Rickwood Park. And Game 4 was in New Orleans, Louisiana at Pelican Stadium. So there were no games played in the home field for the Grays, either Washington, D.C. or in the Pittsburgh area. Hall of Famers in the World Series included Buck Leonard of the Grays and Willie Mays for the Black Barons. The black newspapers paid little attention to the 1948 Negro World Series. For the Negro World Series, the Pittsburgh Courier had a two-paragraph story buried in a welter of articles focusing on blacks in the major leagues. Lawrence D. Hogan. The Grays pulled out of the Negro National League and became a barnstorming team. So the team that won the World Series, so they pulled out. Now, before the World Series, the Negro American League Championship Series, the Birmingham Black Barons defeated the Kansas City Monarchs 4-3. And in the Negro National League Championship Series, the Washington Homestead Grays defeated the Baltimore Elite Giants in 2-1. The top hitter in the Negro Leagues in 1948 was Jim Gillum of the Baltimore Elite Giants. And the top pitcher was Joe Black of the Baltimore Elite Giants as well. Both of them ended up having tremendous MLB careers. So that's the story of the 1948 Cleveland Buckeyes. They had a good year. God bless the guys who played for the Cleveland Buckeyes in 1948 and everyone else associated with the team, including the fans, especially the Spanish-American War veterans, First World War veterans, and Second World War veterans. Captains of the Cuyahoga, lovers of Lake Erie, Terminal Tower Power, fans of the Free Stamp Statue and the Fountain of Eternal Life, Euclid Avenue Electricity, Severance Hall Stalwarts, Cleveland Museum of Art enthusiasts, Rock and Roll Hall of Fame and Museum Rebels, Christmas Story House Happy People, Museum of Contemporary Art Maniacs, Cleveland Botanical Garden Goers, Old Arcade Admirers, Playhouse Square Seers, Settlers Landing Park Purists, Western Reserve Historical Society Wonders, First Energy Stadium Friends, Progressive Field Pals, Rocket Loans Fieldhouse Friends, Cuyahoga Valley National Park Pioneers, and Great Lakes Science Center supporters. Tribe, Browns, Cavs, Munsters, Gladiators, and Fusion rule. Cleveland, City of Champions. Cleveland is the best location in the nation on the north coast of America. New York is the Big Apple. Cleveland is a plum. The Tribe's having a tremendous year. This is our year. It's been 71 years since 1948. Go Tribe. You might consider checking out our website, Adventures in History with Peter J. Ray at peterjray.com. Thank you so much for watching. I really appreciate it. God bless you. Take care, and I'll see you next time.